Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to this week's edition of Sisters Corner. I'm here with Penny from West Yorkshire Racial Justice Network and from who's a community activist who just before the break was detailing an absolutely horrendous incident of hate crime that she and her child was subject to on a train, and just before the break, and it was quite emotional, so we're all feeling a little bit bruised by it because it is a terrible thing, V, for you to have to experience and your child. But we were just talking about how initially the Transport Police didn't take your concern as seriously as you would have liked, but then with the support of West Yorkshire Racial Justice and with you taking your story to the media and it going national, actually it was, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
Yeah. There was a lot of comment all over the country and beyond, if I remember correctly, that as a result, these people have now been prosecuted? Or it's, sorry, I'll let you tell the story.
Yeah, they are going to be prosecuted. The Crown
yes.
Prosecution Service has decided to take it forward on 4 counts, and it will happen soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think we should leave it there because if it's an active case, we shouldn't talk about it anymore. But the important thing is that there is some hope and hopefully some closure for yourselves at the other end. Yeah. But the thing to remember about these things, and obviously I didn't tell you this, is the incident happened, but then the impact that it's left on you and your child and your community, and actually, and people who know you and care about you and use public transport.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my son was obviously really affected. In some ways he was lucky because his local school has been brilliant, to enable him to speak about it and to get it out, and whenever he was upset, over a long period of time. And they also had support from the Bradford Hate Crime Alliance. They've got like someone who used to be a youth worker and who's been really good with him. And yeah, on our community, because we're in some ways we are lucky that because I've been working in the community, it's like give and take, so a lot of them have been here for us, in times of need, so that's been really good. But yeah, even it's been 6 months, and he's still, he's still affected. He still has not felt confident enough to go back on a train. I'm hoping to that if things go forward as we wish, then it will show some kind of justice, some kind of fairness. It doesn't take away the incident, but it does help to go forward. For myself, I think as a mother, it's more like going over and over the incident and thinking, why didn't I do that? Why, for example, my phone was in my hand, and I know about the video. But at the time, did not come straight away to you. It wouldn't have been safe for me to take a video of it anyway, but I could have done like audio, but it didn't. My priority was my child, so I didn't think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it does happen quite quickly. Yeah. Even though it felt a long time, it's a bit of ambivalence. But you still feel like a failure of not protecting your child, so you do go through a lot of bit of dark feeling, in that way. I think my way of dealing with things has been, yes, to really fight for justice, I guess. So taking it forward, like being loud and going to Racial Justice Network and pushing it.
And not just accepting it, just because it's not, because I think this is part of the problem, isn't it? We talked earlier about it being normalised, so people almost expect it, won't report it, and actually these things are not normal, they should never be normal, It's just nasty human beings, and they're picking on you just because of your nationality, your accent, a badge you were wearing, because you're female, because things like that happen, because someone wears a headscarf or doesn't wear a headscarf. It's absolutely unacceptable, isn't it? I think out of your story, hopefully, like you say, it will get resolved in the way you'd like it to. but then also this young woman who sat next to you, and you know, we talk about everyday acts of kindness and stuff, but that's like, for me, an everyday act of heroism.
Yeah.
You know, she doesn't have to punch someone in the face, but the fact that of a full carriage of people, there's just this young woman, and you were saying in our break that sort of had a really positive impact on your son.
Yes, yes. Well, it's been 6 months. We still talk about her, and yeah, it you know, just like you were saying, it just something really simple, and you know, putting her back to them. She didn't engage with them, and just talking to us. And I mean, I remember it, she spoke to my son when she was there. She was trying to distract him and speaking about the magazine he was holding, so that he wouldn't focus on what they were, you know, what the men were saying, you know, which was, I mean, really clever, really good, and it definitely also, because when something like that happens, you can, you know, you can feel that the old white word is scary, but because that lady does that, it kind of like rebalance, you know, things, and reminding yourself, that well, actually there's, you know, there is good people. I mean, we know that, but in the mind of a child, I think it's even more important as well. Absolutely,
yeah. And in adults. So I'm just going to bring us, if you don't mind, quickly to, you know, the books that you've got in front of you there.
Yeah.
So in Limbo, would you just tell us a little bit about what these are testimonies of?
Yes, I mean, there's two, but in Limbo is testimonies of EU nationals in the UK. So back in April 2017, you know, a lady called Elena Remigi, who started to see, in particular on social media, that a lot of EU nationals were sharing in groups that had been created for EU nationals, but they were more for practical things. But there was a lot of distress of people not really knowing what would happen to them, regardless of how long they've been in the UK. If I just explain it, so EU citizen is technically a status, like you've got refugee, asylum seekers, and the status, which means, you know, the rights that they have in a country, but also rights, right to work, right to access services, you know, etc. It means that when the UK comes out of the EU, these rights of this status will no longer exist. So the UK would need to create a new status, if you want. So that's why we've been in uncertainty regarding our rights and regarding the right to even stay in the UK post-Brexit. You know, for the last 2 years, we just don't know, because the government decided to use those 3.5 million EU nationals as pounds, you know, bargaining chips in the negotiation. So in all the negotiation that they have for business, for anything else, we're used as pawns. So that's been really, really difficult, really distressing for people. So as I was saying, in April 2017, we started we created our own little social media group, and a lot of people joined and started to share their testimonies. So that's, I think in that book there's 150 testimonies of EU nationals from all over the UK. So mine is in there, and any other testimonies we've created a blog. Now the reason why we did the book was not just to record you know, people's testimonies, but it was also well, for two things. The first thing I would say is, we were talking about media earlier on, and you know, the swarm of migrants, and forgetting that actually people are individuals and they've got different and different stories, different reasons why they came to the UK and why they stayed, and etc. So it was to, you know, show that individuality, but also to then use. So we then you know, crowdfunded and published, and it was then to use it as a tool to raise awareness about the practical issues, the hate crime, and you know, anything that people were going through, and to push politicians, MPs, and etc. I mean, we've been giving the books to all MPs in well, as many MPs as we can in all over the UK, as many politicians, as many journalists, and also in the EU, in each country and in Brussels. We've been trying to, you know, to give these books. So yeah, that's roughly what it is. The second one, which just came out in June 2018, is the same kind of testimonies, but it's British in Europe,
Right.
who you know, are in the same limbo as us, because their status in the EU is not sure, is not certain either.
I think that's so powerful, isn't it? Because actually, rather than sit around and wait and be victims almost because whatever happens as a result of the referendum, it's just going to take a long time to sort it out, you know, and all the fine detail of individual statuses in terms of trade contracts, all of that. So it's really complicated work, and it's going to take years and years and years. That's all I've understood by it all, by the way. But then actually, whilst that's all going on, you've got lives, haven't you? You've got families, you've got parents with different statuses, you know, some who are British citizens, some who are European citizens, and children who are, you know, betwixt the two. And actually in limbo is a really, really good description of that, isn't it? Because in limbo basically means you're neither in one place nor the other. You're sort of suspended somewhere in the middle. I mean, that is really powerful. And sadly, you know, as we were talking about the sort of unhealthy climate in the world at the moment in terms of towards people who are different or who are migrants particularly. I don't want to cast aspersions, but, you know, the sort of President Trump sort of brigade hasn't been helpful at all, you know, and I know we heard your account. There's a few more accounts of, you know, unhelpful things, and your account in the book is really powerful as well, about how suddenly your co-workers had different viewpoints, you know, the next day about what would happen, and that, you know, is horrendous, isn't it? So you're working side by side with someone who you thought was your co-worker, and the next day it's like, well, are you leaving the country now, or you'll be gone, etc. So that's really hurtful stuff. Yeah. But we also heard just before we started talking about in limbo about this young woman who did quite a bit to reassure your child that there are good people there. So my next question, I suppose, and we've got about 10 minutes, is what can good people do? So we know there's some horrible people in the world. What can good people do to disrupt racism, you know, hate crime on a very individual level, but then also on a sort of a bigger level as a community, if you like? And I know I'm asking a really big question.
It's a really big question.
Yeah. So we start with.
I mean, yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, tell us about your video and what you were promoting with your video on how to disrupt racism.
I think it feels like
Let's start there, and then we'll talk about the big community question.
I might have mentioned some of the points already by earlier when I said about people not to be bystanders. So I called it 5 ways to disrupt racism. It's just basic 5 points. Don't be a bystander. I think second one was around reporting. So whether it's filming it or recording it or something, just a way of like kind of highlighting it.
If it's safe to do so. Obviously.
If it's safe to do so. Third one was around reassuring the person who's kind of gone through the experience, and that's why I know V rung me that night, or not texted me that night after the incident. And then remembered, this is when the lady sat down, I remembered your video. And for me, it was kind of, because as a person, again, who experiencing it, you're like, okay, and you made the point earlier around how isolating, how alienating that would be. Like, and when you're thinking you're surrounded by loads and loads of people, you almost seem, or it feels like everybody else is agreeing with what's happening by this one specific person, if nobody's saying anything to counter it. I did suggest and ask people to join anti-racist movements as well, because it's, for me, it feels it's not enough to say you're not racist. We need to be anti-racist, and by anti-racist I mean people actively doing stuff to oppose and to fight back, or to challenge back, or to just, because like you said, again, we talked about the media and what platforms these people are being allowed to take on, and how much space that they're given, even for that little comment. We've had Lennon recently, the EDL guy, who's kind of the amount of incidents or even demonstrations that we've had recently in Leeds, in Manchester, in all the other areas, and also the coverage that he's been getting almost means that there's an appetite.
These were demonstrations in support of...
Yeah, to free him. Yeah, in support of it, because he got locked up. So it's kind of, and it's sad because I think they are a minority. People feel that way, they're a minority, but it's just those of us who are majority who oppose it. We're not as visible or as loud, so therefore it makes it look like those few people are speaking for the entire country. And same with kind of going for Trump and what's going on at the moment, even not just because we say whatever happens in America, we feel the ripples of it here, but also what's going on in Europe, you know, far right in France, in Germany and all the other places.
It's a scary time.
So it's scary time for people vulnerable, but also for me there was also saying to people to look at something beyond the subtleness. So like it might not seem like it is, but actually if you listen to people who are saying to you, which is what we said about hate crime, if you feel threatened, you want the person who's on the other side to say yes, rather than start challenging and saying, could it have been this, could it have been that? Actually, we want people to hear that and take that on board. But for me, there's a big aspect of educating and people getting informed. So I think, and we talk about it again within the Racial Justice Network, of the miseducation, misinformation that's passed on, not just by media, but the education system as a whole. So if we look at migration, and for us, like our strapline is holistic, economic, spiritual, and repairs to end racial injustice and address legacies of colonialism. And the reason for that is because we feel colonialism has a lot to do with where we are right now. So in terms of people migrating to the country, so we have politicians who use the same thing you said about porn, to get media coverage, to get votes, to get, you know, somewhere further. They always go for migration, and that's why people also bend and do whatever they need to do on migration. So, and why is it that we talk about migration without necessarily talking about why are people migrating? Why is it people, you know, armed conflict, or is it foreign policy? Is it people who are kind of hurting and damaged because of climate change and things like that, or religion, that mean that
or
people
prejudice.
are coming?
So, you know, if people are fearful because of their political affiliations or because of their identity, that they will be persecuted in their country. So people move for lots of different reasons, don't they?
Move for reasons.
And colonialism is interesting. Lots of people came to the UK to work. They were invited
but also,
here.
yeah, the resources. If you look at places,
after
all of
people went
happened,
and took over half the world, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is complete history in that.
That is missed out in the system, which means rather than people getting angry and fearful, and you know, for people who are migrating here, I think what we end up with will be compassion, because you think nobody wants to run and leave the entire family and just come and be a burden. I mean, we've got a lot of these stories coming up and time again, but I think even now when you look at, because I know we've been talking about hostile environment policy, what's happened to the EU citizens, they've had rights stripped off, or they're getting the rights stripped off. Why is that? So we've got people who've been here seeking asylum, but now no longer, if they go to, for example, to use the NHS, education system, all of these angles that they've had access to certain services, not all of them because they weren't even allowed to work, but somehow even that's getting stripped off, but people aren't aware. But why is it all right for somebody to have zero rights just because they've been born somewhere else, or for certain reasons they've managed to come here and not others?
Just going to cut you off a little bit, just to structure us back to the 5 points. So say them with me, right? So that it was... can't
remember them all. So
yeah,
not to be a bystander.
Yeah, don't be a bystander. So if you can, go and sit with that person. Not to engage the actual perpetrators necessarily.
Yeah, no, you said as long as you're not putting yourself at risk.
Report it as soon as you can. And actually, you know, in some situations you won't be able to just get your phone out and ring somebody or whatever, but in some situations you will be able to. So, you know, do call the police, you know, do talk to the conductors, who, you know, whoever's around. I think that's quite important. I think your next point was about...
As long as it doesn't escalate the situation, because if you sometimes, I think if the intervention is somebody going and shouting at the person who's doing it, which I know that lady, then that might escalate it. But then, the final point, which is kind of where ended up going down was really around anti-racism work, but also looking at the bigger structures. So for me, the point we were making around migration is looking at the bigger structures, but also creating spaces for the bigger structures to be spoken about, because if we can only talk about migration or racism or whatever in small circles, we're not getting to everybody. So whatever position somebody is at,
we need to talk to everybody. We need people. You mentioned misinformation and accurate information. People need to check that information, and actually we need to check our humanity as well.
Yep.
And I think that was what you were just saying there, is actually we need to have empathy and compassion for people who are coming under quite stressful situations actually, and once they're here. We have literally 2 or 3 minutes left of our conversation. So in terms of viewers, if you need help with any of these issues, if you want to report, there's a few national places that you can talk to. Stop Hate UK, Tell Mama. If you're somewhere like Bradford, there's a local Hate Crime Alliance who have lots of third-party reporting centres. But there are, you know, those similar procedures everywhere. In terms of, you know, how do we combat hate, if you could summarise, V, you know, on top of what Penny's just said in the next minute or so, what last thing would you like to tell our viewers?
Oh, that's hard. I mean, I was thinking all the time you were talking at all. I was thinking is it might not be exactly what you want me to say, but I was going to say it's very important actually that we don't just look out for people who look like us, but so like if you had, I need to be there for you, you need to be there for me. And I think, you know, it's very, very important, and learning about racism, xenophobia, you know, and yeah, I think they're the two most important things.
So empowering ourselves, and then also recognizing so just recognizing the humanity in all of us, and actually, you know, we need to take time to care for each other. Thank you so much. They can look at your website, Racial Justice Network, if anyone would like to know more, and in Limbo and the blog if you want to know more about V's work with the 3 million EU citizens. Thank you very much for listening. That's all we've got time for today. Thank you so much. Inshallah, see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.